Okay, everybody, this is Kevin Lockett once again. Today, we are talking to the Senior Maverick, which is an excellent title, at Wired Magazine, and author of the book Excellent Advice for the Living or for Living, Kevin Kelly. How are you today, sir?
I'm really, really delighted to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And it's always a pleasure to talk to another Kevin.
Kevins are very special in the world. My teacher once told me that, and we are, because that name is not used as much, so we kind of stand out.
Yeah. I love Kevins. Every Kevin I've met, I've liked.
Hopefully I'm the next one. I saw your interview with Tim Ferriss, and he was going over some of the things that you did. And the one thing that stood out to me is that you did a music video in 1969. So I was born in 1969. I am of the MTV generation. So I'm curious what that song was and what was the process of putting that together.
So I was just in high school, and I was interested in photography, and I bought this, like at a garage sale, a little tiny 8mm camera, and I had a little film in it, and we had a band, but we didn't play any music. So we had the T-shirts, we had fans, we did community service, we had everything. We had like an album cover, but we didn't play any music. And it was a little bit kind of a conceptual thing. We had a newsletter, which we did. And so I did a little music video, and the soundtrack was Allman Brothers.
Oh.
Okay, so it wasn't music that we created. It was just a film I made with black and white and color mixed in together and kind of craziness. And it had a soundtrack, which was added later because the camera didn't have sound in it. So, but I did it in 1969. It was when I was first beginning to do photography, when film was incredibly expensive. But yet I still put that together, and I put it up on YouTube, which I can link to you if you want to see it.
Yeah, I'll check that out. I was going to ask you this question later, but since you brought that up, your background basically mostly is in photography. Yeah. You work for Life Magazine. If the kids don't know what Life Magazine is, Google it. You'll be fascinated what you'll see. Let me ask you a question, because you've been writing for a long time. You've been on the creative side of editorial. At your core, are you still a photographer or are you a writer?
That is such a great question. For a long time, I was so into photography that I was a camera. I would walk around and like click, when things kind of lined up in the right way, I would click in my mind, like taking a picture. But I actually weaned myself off from that because I found it way kind of too addictive. So I would say at my heart, I'm neither a photographer nor a writer. I am a born editor, presenter. And I came from a magazine family. I was a magazine junkie. I made newsletters and magazines as a kid. It was my first jobs were in magazines. I liked the idea of taking the photographed images and the writing and putting them together into this thing. And of course, with the web, we're doing the same kind of thing. And so that's where my genius is. That's where my ease is. That's where I find it really hard to write. I can do photography without thinking, but what I'm really best at is bringing them together.
Right. I do have a quick question about Wired. So today, if someone wants to start a blog, there's a lot of information out there. If you want to start a YouTube channel about technology, there's a lot of information out there. When you guys launched Wired, how hard was it? Because it was probably a monthly magazine. How hard was it to get information every month? Because like I said, it's easy today, but back then.
Well, first of all, launching Wired was difficult for many, many reasons. Among them, there was kind of like a little bit of a recession at the moment, at that time. But more importantly, what we were trying to do was not understood or appreciated by anybody. We were saying we're not a technology magazine, right? There were computer magazines and they had ads for computers and bits and modems and peripherals inside. And we were saying, no, we are a lifestyle magazine. And they were saying, what? What's the lifestyle? We're saying, no, technology is a culture. There's an emerging cultural lifestyle. And so we want ads that are liquor and clothing and stuff. And they're saying, you're talking about technology that doesn't compute. So there was no category for Wired. And that was actually difficult because when you're trying to sell ads, you have to have a category. When you're on a newsstand, you have to be placed somewhere. And there wasn't any place for this. We were the only, not the best. And so that was a really hard sell. And then where did we get the content? Well, had been editing and publishing a magazine before that called Whole Earth Review. And basically I took my writers and subjects and all my contacts to Wired. And it was really funny because I was kind of doing the same thing I'd been doing for 10 years before, but this was a little tiny magazine that was in black and white. It had no ads. It was readers. It was all subscriptions, which was really innovative. But it had a very small circulation. Nobody paid attention to it. And suddenly Wired was at the right time in the right place. And it was the beginning of the internet. And now the entire world was looking at us. We were doing it in color, higher budget. So for me, it was thrilling because I was doing the same thing I've been doing for 10 years in a little tiny magazine that nobody knew about. And now bring the same writers over, the same ideas. And now suddenly everybody thinks it's genius. And it's like, well, that's another example of a 20-year overnight success.
Right. That's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
That is a fascinating story because it's different now because there's less magazines today. And I was going to ask you, like, well, would you give advice if someone started launching a magazine? But
we'll say, don't do it on paper for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But let's talk to you while you're here today. You wrote your book, Excellent Advice for Living, and you initially wrote it for your young adult children,
right?
But then they expanded to something else.
Right.
So what was the point where you felt like, oh, well, I love my kids and this is great, but this might be bigger than I thought it would be?
I posted it on my blog. And again, I have a blog that's not that popular. I don't even post that often to it. And for some reason, it went viral. It started ricocheting around the internet. People would pass it and talking about it. And it's like, wow, I was not expecting that. So on my next birthday, I gave it away on my birthday, which is kind of like an Irish Hobbit thing where you give presents on your birthday. And so I did my next birthday. I did another set because everybody, including my kids and my family, really liked it. And they also went viral. So, oh, there's something here. So I did a third set, and then it made it into the New York Times op-ed page. I was like, oh, okay, these are working on more than just my kids. A lot of people are responding to these. I would like to, they kind of are at home online. They're really suitable for being passed around. But I think there's an advantage in bringing them all together because you don't want to have to troll through Twitter to find them. I'll bring them into one book, a book that you could hand to somebody. And here's what I'm actually finding that people like this book is people who have kids say, look, my kids don't pay any attention. They're not going to pay attention to me giving advice, but they'll pay attention to someone else. So I give them this book.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. In the Tim Ferriss interview, I think it came up. It was almost like tweets. Like when I was reading it, I was like, oh yeah, these are like motivational tweets that you can kind of do every day. Yeah. So it's easier to digest.
Right, and that's why I wrote them down. I wrote them down to help me as reminders. They're reminders as the way to think of it. 450 reminders of things that you might have known and forgotten, or maybe reminders of the kind of the Stoics, the ancient wisdom of the Bible, of what happened here? Of things that the Confucius said. And so I think I wanted to put them into a way that it would help me remember them. That was the actual origin. I was writing these down to remind myself so I could repeat them to myself. And, even practical things like, where to put things when I pick them up, to put them back where I found them, where I look for them. So that was the origin. And now that they're in that kind of form, they also happen to be easily transmittable as well.
Mm-hmm. So if you don't mind, I want to go over a few of those because I have some questions. I have a bunch of them. I narrowed them down to 5, I think.
Okay, that's hard.
It is because I only have an hour with you.
Right.
Okay, so the first one is one that I have to work on. I have to do this. You don't have to attend every argument you are invited to.
Yeah, you don't. You don't have to. You're too busy. I'm too busy to attend this argument.
See, that's the thing. I'm not a combative person, but I feel like, oh no, but I have something to say. But it's okay. It's like, you know what? Maybe I need to
right.
push this
Well,
aside.
here's actually, I have continued to write these down, new ones that I thought of after the book was published, and one of them was just the other day. I spend most of my time trying to make it as small as possible, so I'm not sure I've gotten it there yet. But there is this idea that most arguments are not about the argument, and so you can kind of stop the arguing because you're not really arguing about the right thing. There's arguments are usually not about the thing that's being argued about.
Right.
And that's another reason why you can don't have to attend them, because they're usually not about what they appear to be about.
That's very true. I'll slip this one in here because it's kind of close to the same. This goes back to my therapy days. It's true. Like outlaw the word "you" during domestic arguments.
Yeah. You talk about yourself and how things feel, but talking about you is accusatory in some ways. It just doesn't help the conversation. I'm not sure why that works. I mean, you might have some better reasons, but that's been my experience.
Yeah, they taught us saying using I statements. I feel like, because like you say, it feels accusatory when you use
right.
You,
And really, you can only talk about yourself in terms of what you have for certain. So yes, that's really helpful. The other bit of marriage advice, I've been married 35 years, is we swap in having periods of time where the other partner is always right. Okay. Like, okay, you're always right. It's like, and that works really great. And you can kind of switch it up, but just having that where you don't have the argument, whatever it is. Yeah, you're right. You're always right. Okay. And then we go on from there, and it works out.
Let me write that down. I think I'm about to use that pretty soon. Now here's one that a lot of my friends, they fell into. Don't take a job because it pays the most money.
Yeah. And also, here's another one. Don't work for someone you don't want to become.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Don't work for someone you don't want to become. If it's like, it doesn't really matter about the money thing. Like, you're going to become like the people that you associate with. So you definitely don't want to work for someone you don't want to become. And, tell me your calendar, and I'll tell you, what you actually, where you're going, and tell me about your friends, who your friends are, and I can tell you about who you're going to become. And so, Tim Ferriss has this great saying that you're the average of the 5 closest people around you, and that's another way of saying the same thing. So yeah, do choose who you want to spend your time in giving. When you're working for someone, you're also surrendering your most precious thing, which is your time. Okay, and that's the only thing in the world that's really not abundant, and you are also going to become like that person that you're surrendering your precious things to. So you have to be very careful about that.
Yeah, what advice would you give to your kids? Like, I mean, when they first start off looking for a plan, what advice did you give them outside of that?
About work?
Yeah.
So we I think doing kind of grunt work is actually good for people. So we didn't dissuade them from that, but we did want them to be working for people that they respected. That was really important. And the other thing we always said, and this is hard, I think another piece of advice is that if you try to get a job, I'm not saying as well as it's in the book, but if you're trying to get a job, if your reason for getting a job is that you desperately need one, then you're just kind of another problem for the boss. But if you can go to the boss and show how you can solve their problems, like you're thinking like the boss, then it's an easy hire, because this is what the boss has problems. And if you're just coming, you're going to be another problem they have. They don't want it. But if you're coming saying, I can solve some of your problems, your problem might be that you don't have enough waiters, or your problem might be that you need this, but you're going to be a solution to the boss's problems. That's what you always want to be trying to do. So it requires thinking like the boss, even though you're just for hire. If you think like the boss, it's like, what's the boss's problems? Can you be solving the boss's problem then you're golden. You're good. You're hired, and you can make yourself indispensable. And so we kind of tried to switch them around, thinking like, I need a job. You should give me a job because I really need it bad to some of your problems. Maybe your problem is you need to have wood moved from here to there. I can do that. I'll solve that. Maybe your problem is you need someone to show up every day who dependably to do something. I'm going to solve your problem. So I think those two things were the main thing we told about our kids when they were first starting to work.
Right. That was good advice. Here's one that's probably, it could lean towards YouTubers today and podcasters. The best way to learn anything is to teach what you know.
Yeah. And you're right. We're seeing that on YouTube these days. And by the way, I've tried to make some YouTubes, and the first thing I discover is I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know this well enough to teach. And so, and it doesn't require that you actually become a master at something to teach. Even as you're learning something, if you try and flip it to teach it, it will help you learn faster, because it uncovers basically where your ignorance is and where you don't know much faster. We kind of fool ourselves sometimes in thinking how much we know. And if we actually are forced to teach it, we're faced with the fact that, actually, I don't really know that. And so that can accelerate our learning in that. So even as we're learning things, try and teach it as a means to learning faster.
All right. What did you learn writing this book?
Oh my gosh. That's a good question. I like that question. No one's asked me that before. So, I think I learned maybe how much of my own guidance I inherited in terms of like from the ancients, from the past, things that I didn't actually come up with, that in the sense that I am being guided not just out of my own ideas, but in some ways from the wisdom of the past that is formed me. And so I became a little bit more aware of how I'm relying on the ancient wisdoms from the Bible to the Stoics and others to guide my life. And maybe I wasn't particularly aware of that before. And I think maybe on a more superficial level, I might have learned about the power of articulating things, because there were things that I kind of knew and I'd never tried to put into words before. But there's, again, it's like trying to teach, but like that act of trying to reduce something to a little sentence kind of elevated them in a certain way, or increased their potency, or that articulation was very powerful in awakening and enabling me to remind myself of them. And I think maybe I learned about that power of things that you think you know, but when you go to articulate them, that crystallization unleashes something.
I think the thing that you have is everything that we should be doing, because you've done a lot of things, right? And you could say like, well, I've done this, I've done that, but you're constantly evolving. Right. And I think that's something that's missing in a lot of people today, is that they stop evolving at a certain point.
Right.
All right.
So when I travel a lot. There's three kind of reasons to travel. One is for relaxation, kind of pampering yourself, rewarding yourself. There's another one like in rejuvenation. There's another one for adventure, where you're kind of testing yourself. For me, I travel in order to learn. So I like to go to places that are very different and have my mind changed about things. And so for me, learning is one of the things I'm trying to optimize in my life, was to keep learning, to keep growing, as you say, to keep changing. And I do that in the hopes that I'm moving towards becoming my true self, to become the best I can be, or to be the only, as I would say, to be my true self. And so that's what the learning is about, is it's learning with a goal. And the goal is to find out who I am, what I can do that other people can't do, to do the things that I'm here on earth to do. And that's a very, very high bar to figure out. That's a lifelong assignment. I didn't know about this when I was 21. I didn't, and so most people don't. There's maybe a few who do, but most of us are on a lifelong journey, and we don't ever really arrive. It's kind of like a direction where we're headed to trying to find out what it is that we do best, and things that we find easy to do, with others find hard. And I try lots of things in order to try and help me arrive at that place, at that destination, or at that direction.
Is there a city or place that changed you the most?
I was blown away by Kathmandu in Nepal in the 70s, where there was probably 500,000 people and there were no vehicles. Can you imagine a completely pedestrian city? Imagine New York City without any vehicles whatsoever, not even bicycles. It was in some ways magical. It was horrible in other ways because they didn't have any plumbing. I mean, literally no toilets. They were crap on the street. But there was this other thing of it was like a time machine. It was like going back into time and living in medieval age. And there I was, and I was surrounded by medieval, feudal city and people and their practices, and that was a total gift in that way. And it just sort of ignited in me an appreciation for what the modern world has brought, because while it was exciting to visit, it would have been a pretty rotten place to actually have to live if you knew what we have now.
Right.
And so so that was a real treat, and really changed how I came to think about technology and appreciating kind of what we do, and the cost. I mean, we pay a cost, so to speak, to have the modern world, but I'm glad to pay that cost now because I see what we've gained from it.
Right. Hey, that sounds fascinating. Going back to the list. Now, here's something that I didn't think as a young person, but in recent years, with life and people that I know, this has become more important. Before you're old, attend as many funerals as you can bear and listen. Nobody talks about the departed achievements. The only thing people will remember is what kind of person you were while you were achieving.
That is so true. That did shift my mind, going to those funerals and hearing them not talk about the number of books that they wrote, or whether they had a bestseller, or whether they got a patent, or whether they got the Oscar. That was not what they were talking about. They were talking about their kindness or not, or their ability to laugh or tell a joke, or how they made people feel. And that was like, oh, okay, I have to redefine my definition of success. All right, it's not how many Skittles you've got in a jar at the end, right? It's there are other things that you want to pay attention to, and so so that was, and again, I think that works on people. Try go out of your way, attend some funerals, and listen. You'll have a revelation.
What was your definition of success before when you were younger, and how is it different now?
Well, because I'm a college dropout, I kind of surrendered this idea that I was going to be rich and wealthy and probably even famous too. And I thought I was really kind of signing up for a kind of life of poverty. So I think my idea of success when I was younger was having being self-sufficient. I had a little bit of David Thoreau as my hero, and I had a little bit of a fantasy of being kind of self-sufficient. I've changed my ideas about that because I think nobody is self-sufficient. All those people living out in the woods thinking they're self-sufficient, they're not self-sufficient. You can have a little bit of that, but it's just, you can't really have a modern life and think that you're making it all up and you're not dependent on anybody else. We are so dependent on each other to remarkable degrees. So I think I've shifted my definition of success to wanting to have as much control of my time as possible. So I say elsewhere in this book that, the rich have a lot of money, but the wealthy have time. And it's easier to be time rich, wealthy than money rich. And so and I prefer to be wealthy than rich in that sense of time. And I changed my mind because I met a lot of people who were really wealthy with money and they didn't have time. It's like, no, time. It's much better to have control of your time than having a lot of money. And so, so that's my definition now is having that. And then, as I say, the other thing in the last bit of advice in the book, which is hopefully on the day before you die, you can say that you've truly become yourself. So that's my other definition of success. If I can reach that, to say on the day before I die, I've truly become myself, that's my definition of success.
There's another one that you have, which sounds like a 70s R&B lyric or some from a blaxploitation movie, which I love. The main thing is keep the main thing the main thing. I was like, this is so cool. What does it mean?
Well, they often actually, that came from Silicon Valley.
Oh.
That's a little mantra that they say in Silicon Valley for the startups, because there are so many different ways you can go. There's so many opportunities. There are so many choices and options. And they say, no, keep the main thing, because it's a way of focusing. And so you have to kind of just ask yourself, well, what is the main thing? Because we want to make sure that the main thing is to keep the main thing. And so it's another way of focusing.
Okay. Here's one again that could go to YouTubers, because I think this happens for YouTubers who become successful. They become mini celebrities, and they don't know how to handle it. And it is, where is it? Oh yeah, you don't really want to be famous. Read the biography of any famous person, which is true.
It is so true, because I've been around people who are famous, and it's amazingly how imprisoning and debilitating that level of fame is. It's a cost that they're kind of willing to pay for their success. But most of us can't handle it and wouldn't want it. And for some people, it's like say like an Obama, it's kind of like it comes with the territory. But for others who are aiming for that, no, don't aim for it. It's not something you really want.
I'm based in Akron, Ohio, and I've watched LeBron James since he was in middle school.
Yeah,
and it's amazing how he's handled success. I mean, he has it for where he came from as far as being like this teen phenomenon. Usually, those guys burn out or something happens or something tragic happens. But the fact that he's been able to do this, he's almost not the norm in a lot of ways, because there's usually tragic things happen along the way.
Yeah, it's really tough. No, I mean, if you here's what it is. I had a touch of fame because in China, most of my fans are in China. So in China, I have been a rock star. I have bodyguards. So I have a little bit of fame, tiny bit in China. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is like, I can see how this is very debilitating and very warping. And it's not even necessarily like it goes to your head. It's simply that you're just cut off from things. Like if you can't walk outside and go down the street, but you have to contend with fans the whole time, and they want to take selfies with you the entire time, you can't really, it's harder to enjoy life. It's harder to be spontaneous, to discover things. It's hard to learn. You're penalized tremendously. And so, yes, you may be recognized and have some respect, but at the same time, that level of fame is really debilitating. And so I think you shouldn't aim for it.
Right. You're a pretty optimistic person. I mean, has there ever been times that you weren't as optimistic? Because it seems like you seem to see the brighter side of things.
Well, actually, I am more optimistic than ever been, and I'm actually deliberately becoming more optimistic. I think
Mm,
optimism can be a temperament, but it's also a choice. And I have chosen to, I think it's a skill. I've chosen to enlarge my skill of optimism. There's something in child psychology called learned optimism, where they actually try to teach school children to become more optimistic, because what they found is that those who are more optimistic thrive better.
mhm,
And part of the little bit that they teach them, which I think is in my book, which is that the optimist children come to see that any setback is only temporary.
mm,
Setbacks are not part of their identity. If a child says, "Oh, I'm just unlucky," or "This always happens to me," or "I'm never going to be able to do this or that," they're taking the setbacks as kind of permanent or part of their identity. If they're taught instead that setbacks are always temporary, things that you overcome that are inevitable to come your way, but they're just going to pass, that's part of the ingredients for kind of this learned optimism. And I think that's true now as well.
yeah, I was that kid. I think when you're a kid, you don't have a lot of life experience.
Right.
So everything that happens at that moment is the worst thing that's going
Right.
to ever happen to me for the rest of my life. And it saddens me because you hear a lot of kids committing more suicides these days.
Right,
And
right.
you just want to grab them and say, no, it's going to get better. But it's
Right.
hard when you're a kid because you don't see the big picture.
Right,
You just
right,
see
right.
what's happening the here and now.
Right. And when I was a kid growing up in the 60s in New Jersey, I find it really hard to convey to my children how impoverished we were for information.
Hmm.
I mean, we were kind of a middle class family, but we had no information, no exposure to other stuff. I didn't have any big brothers, or I mean, I just looking back on, like, for role models or for things. We didn't have TV actually when I was growing up, so just finding and being exposed to things that you can get on YouTube today are just, it's mind-boggling. But for us, just having kind of an outside exposure, as you said, to see that whatever might be happening is common, that everybody goes through it, that it's not permanent. Those are big lessons, and I think something that parents can kind of instill into their kids.
Right. Can we talk artificial intelligence for a second?
Of course.
Thank you. So, okay, so I remember last year everything was about NFTs and that burned out. But artificial intelligence is only going to get bigger because it's not going anywhere.
Right.
What would you tell someone who is a non-techie,
Uh-huh.
feels like, oh, it's just a fad, it's artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. How can you tell people that they need to start embracing these things because it's only going to impact our lives as we go along, if not already?
Yeah. So AI is something that's unlike NFTs. It isn't going to go away. Um, I preach the gospel of trying these things out. The thing about the chat GPTs is they're basically free. You should be trying them. And it doesn't mean that you actually have to adopt them or become a thing, but you need to expose yourself to them in order to understand them enough that you could ignore them later on if you wanted to. So I think there is a certain, what I call technical literacy, tech literacy, of the necessary thing of touching these and understanding them, so that you don't have to rely on other people's opinion about them and whether they're good or bad or whatever. And also, collectively, I think the only way for us to steer these technologies is to use them. And we can think about these a lot. A lot of people have thoughts about them, and there's a lot of people who have thoughts about them that never use them, and those are basically not useful at all. What we want to do is we want to use these, and through the use of them, we can discover what they're actually good for, what they're actually bad for, rather than what we can imagine them good for or imagine them bad for. So, like, for instance, employment, I've been trying to track down if there's been a single artist who has lost their job to AI, and I have not found any. There have been some other couple little narrow niche occupations, like transcribers, caption transcribers that have lost their jobs. But artists, I haven't found any. And yet that is kind of a worry about it. But that's a worry. It's an imaginary worry. There hasn't been any. The evidence so far is nobody has been fired because of AI in terms of the arts. So I think I just want to emphasize that use them, try them out. Have your first person experience that you can build on and have an opinion on it after that.
Other than ChatGPT, what are other AI applications that you like?
I use the image generators, and I post something every day that together AI and I together make art. In the past years, I've done art every day that I made for myself by myself, and now I'm making the art with AI, and I'm perfectly confident and at ease in co-signing it because I spent hours working with the AIs to make something good enough to post. It's very easy to have the AIs make something immediately, but it's not usually it's interesting, it's cool, but to make something really great, you have to kind of work with these things over and over again and spend a lot of time and have a conversation. And so I'm happy to say this is a joint effort. And so these are called like Mid-Journey. There's DALL-E, the Stable Diffusion. Google just announced one today, their image version. So there's lots of them around. A lot of them have free options. Go and use them. And particularly if you're not an artist, that's what we're talking about. Is you can say, I can't paint. I can't. Well, all the more reason to try one of these because this new medium, this new thing may be just the thing for you. You may just really blossom using it.
Right. So before Steven Spielberg made The Minority Report,
right,
he brought a bunch of you guys together up in Futurists to a hotel, and you guys brainstormed what 2054 is going to be. So Minority Report came out like 2002. So we're at 2023. Yeah. Are we on path to 2054? Are we ahead of 2054? Are we behind 2054? Like, where are we on that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I haven't thought about that, but I doubt that the world will look like what we were painting the world in 2054 to look like, because that's only in 30 years. It's possible some of the things could happen. The holographic stuff. So anyway, for those who haven't seen the movie, there's some holographic imagery in the home. There's cars that they, I don't know, hard to describe. They run up and down buildings vertically. There's ads that follow you as you walk through. That can certainly be true by that time. So I would say, I'm going to just rough and say, I would say maybe half the things that we talked about then might be around in 2050. The half of them are they're on the way. I know that one of the things I came up with for the film was the little street inhalers that he was addicted to. And this idea, because I have a friend who actually developed the technology to deliver drugs by inhaling instead of by injection. Oh. And those exist today. And so that one is, they haven't been turned over to street use of drugs, but there are definitely prescription drugs that are delivered that way now. So I would say we're halfway. So half of them are halfway.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Again, I'm still waiting for the Jetsons flying cars. Like, I'm still mad. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
So I have my son-in-law worked for the flying car company, and my other friend is running it, and they're going to basically be closer to like small planes than to flying cars.
I'll take
the whole drone thing. They found out that the problem with the drones is that they just are not aerodynamically clean enough to go any distance efficiently. They actually have to, they're just too noisy and too much energy. So they have to make wings to really travel and commute. So they're basically like going to be vertical takeoff things where they take off vertically and then they turn into a plane and go. and then land. And so, is that a flying car? Yeah, kind of.
It's close enough. Okay, before I end our conversation, I was going to ask you this question, but I saw Tim Ferriss ask you this question, but since we got time, I still like this thing that you said, which is true. Don't be the best, be the only.
Yeah. That's my core thing. If you're trying to be the best, it's a very limited niche because only one person, only one thing can be the best. And so you're kind of limiting it, and it's very, very competitive in that sense. And you're restricting it, and you're basically also you're kind of trying to follow someone else's idea of success. And it's very unlikely that you would personally have the right combination of talents and skills and experience to ever achieve that. So for most of us, what we want to be doing is we want to be going in a different direction. We want to be seeking the only, something that only we can do, that our mix and variety of talents and skills and geniuses and experiences can produce. And that's a much more feasible and achievable destination and direction. And as I said before, we're unlikely to actually ever arrive there. We can only kind of head it in a certain direction, incrementally getting better. And I've met people who are very successful, and they're asking themselves the same question of what they want to do when they grow up, and they're kind of still moving in that way. And so, and if we can arrive there, then again, we are closer to having contributed something that only we can contribute to. We often will find it. We're doing things that we find easy that other people find hard, and we're more likely to be in a position where a breakthrough can come through, where something new can arrive, because it's not the established category that you would need if you wanted to be the best. So, yeah, if you at all can, if you have an opportunity, trying to head towards something. And by the way, the one last thing about this, you cannot truly become yourself by yourself.
Mm.
You need, paradoxically, you need the entire world to help you become unique. You need family and friends and colleagues and clients and customers and fans to help you see who you're becoming and where you want to go. And so don't attempt, you won't succeed by becoming yourself by yourself. So you need to rely on, in a weird way, you need to rely on others to become something wholly unique. And
That's something I always struggled with, because I ran track, I write, I was a DJ, all solitary things, because I always felt like I can do it by myself. I don't need anybody. I can control this plane.
Right.
But as I grown older, I realized that wasn't the best way to go. Even though I enjoyed some successes, I probably would have done more if I reached out more to people.
Right. And it's not too late.
No, it's not.
You understand that, right? You're this is a lifelong thing. So again, and also, if you map the life journey of anybody that you admire or you think hold it as successful, you'll see that their path is just meandering, crazy thing that has right turns and detours and backups and switch arounds, and is completely not a straight line. Okay, and so that's going to be your life too. Is there isn't going to be a straight line. This requires all those things, and that's part of what makes you different and unique. And so, in your own case, all those other things you've done, from DJing and track and stuff, are all contributing to where you're going, and is part of how you have to get there. And that's not a bug. That's a feature. And so. So straight lines are fiction. There's very, very, very few people who know exactly what they're really good for and good about when they're young, and they're going right there. It's just so rare. Most of us are meandering through this, trying out things and relying on others to help us see what we're becoming, to help us abandon things that when we do need to abandon them. and to suggest to us places where we might find more of ourselves. So it is a collective effort in order to become uniquely you.
What was the best advice you ever received?
If I'm invited to do something 6 months from now, ask myself whether I want to do it tomorrow morning. Okay, so something happened here. So I get lots of invitations, and I would say yes. So here's, maybe I would say it this way: I learned I learned how to say no without having to give a reason, but doing it very, very politely in a way that would make it seem useful to someone else. So learning to say no gracefully and gently and firmly was really, really good, because a lot of what life is about is keeping the main thing. And so learning how to say no in a very, very what's the word I want? Empathetic way was really one of the best skills I learned.
Yeah, that's really tough, because you don't. Because I had problems with that before, where I was like, well, I don't want to let people down.
Right.
But sometimes you have to say, like, and then I went to the other side, like, no, I'm not doing it. Now I know you got to find like a happy, nurturing way to say no.
Well, so I worked with someone, Stuart Brand, and here's what I learned from Stuart about saying no. He's very good at it. So here's how he kind of taught me to pitch it, which is your invitation, your event, your project, whatever it is, I am unable to give your project or event, whatever it is, the kind of attention that it deserves, and therefore I'm doing you a favor by saying no. Okay, that's basically what it comes down to.
Right.
Is your thing is I agree that it's important and good and necessary, and because I respect that and knowing my own commitments, I am unable to give it what it deserves, and I have to say no. So that's the framing, and it's honest and genuine, gentle and polite, and yet absolutely firm. You're not giving excuses. You're just saying, I can't give what you would want, and therefore I'm unable to join.
I'll try that one day. Kevin Kelly, thank you for the conversation. Tell me why people should pick up your book, Excellent Advice for Living.
Excellent Advice for Living.
There it is.
On sale right now. Lots of little tiny proverbs, and 450 of them. I think it'll help you.
You gotta fix your camera. Your camera got.
I'm sorry,
no, you're good. There you go. Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
so
excited about the book.
I think what happens is that we need reminders. We need reminders to remind ourselves what is really good and what works. And I think these little bits of proverbs would help you become a better you, as they have helped me. And again, if you have a parent or others if you know all this stuff yourself and have no need for it, you may have a friend, relative, family, or child, or parent who would appreciate it as well.
All right. Let me squeeze in one more, because it's something that we haven't talked about. Movement plus variety equals health. Health is very important.
It is. It's very important. And there's lots of health advice and lots of medical advice. And for me, in reading and hearing about it all, and particularly watching people that I know, particularly people that I know getting older, it's about keep moving, keep doing things, keep trying things, but a variety of those. It's the change up. It's not getting into the rut. It's not doing the same things over and over again. You're actually trying to use new muscles, new movements, new parts of your body. You want to keep them all going. Your body is very complex. There's lots of things going on. So the only way to kind of make sure you keep all of them functioning is to kind of keep spreading that exercise around, which means you have a variety of things. You eat a variety of things, including junk food, but you actually want to have a wide variety and keep that movement. And that's in some ways what a lot of the health advice kind of reduces down to.
Is there exercise that you do, or is there a smoothie that you do that kind of keeps you going? Or?
For me, I am a born walker. I can walk off. I mean, I can walk over any. I can just walk and walk and walk and walk. I love walking. I'm really good at it. I do bike riding too. I've ridden my bicycle from Canada to Mexico and from San Francisco to New York a couple times. I mean, 2 different times. So, but walking is for me, and I can walk all day long, and I walk usually 10,000 steps a day, and then more other times when we're kind of doing week-long hikes and things like that. So, and I find, by the way, I'm getting my exercise, but also the walking will clear your mind and then fill it with new ideas. It's one of the best things to do for thinking, for which is what I kind of do a lot of, is for like getting ideas, working on things. It's and I have walking meetings these days.
Walking meetings.
Okay, so if someone's coming to visit, instead of sitting down in a chair, we go, let's go for a walk, and we'll have our discussion while walking. And that was Steve Jobs was famous for that. Other people have picked it up. It's you go out, you have a meeting, but you're going to walk the entire time. It works best with one-to-one. And so so walking for me is my exercise, primary.
Yeah. Sounds good. What was biking from Canada to Mexico like?
Well, okay, so when I was younger, I'd ridden from San Francisco to New York. That took me 3 months. I went 5,000 miles. When I rode from Canada to Mexico along the coast, I did it with my son, who was a teenager, and his nephew, my nephew, his cousin. So 2 teenage boys and me. It was fabulous, I have to tell you. We did 50 miles a day for 40 days. 50 miles is very doable. It's not a lot on a bicycle. There were lots of time to rest and stop. So we weren't like crazy. Some people do it 100 miles a day. That's crazy. 50 miles a day was very doable for almost anybody. There were a lot of state parks the entire way, so we camped the whole way. And for them, well, for me, it was a kind of a bonding with my son. It was really great. For them, they were getting out of the bubble. Growing up in the Bay Area, it's a bubble. But going along the coast, going through some pretty hard-scrabbled towns, they got to see and with the campgrounds and be with people, have conversations with people from backgrounds they would normally never have. And that was really very, very powerful. So, and then they got to accomplish something that they didn't think they could do. And it turned out they did it. It's really very powerful when you're a teenager.
That is very powerful. Well, thank you, Kevin Kelly. If people want to check you out, where can they go?
So if you want to track me down, I have a website with my initials, kk.org. And I have everything there. I posted stuff, my blog and whatnot. And then I'm on the socials. I'm Kevin, the number 2 Kelly, where I post kind of on a regular basis. I don't respond a lot, but I post a lot. And so, and these days is posting some of the bits of advice and some of the bits that's not in the book, as well as my digital imagery and painting. So enjoy it.
All right. Thanks a lot, sir.
Kevin, it was a blast. I love it.
It was a blast.
Great. You're fun.
I'm a fun guy.
I love it.
You gave me some good things to think about, and I need to get a bike.
I love your spirit. So thank you for your positivity and for your attention to my book. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.